Okay, so I have a question. You ever just sit somewhere and feel genuinely, useless? Because I spent my entire Sunday trying to fix the drawer in my kitchen, the little one that sticks.
The one you've mentioned before?
I've mentioned it like 4 times, and every time someone's like, just plane the wood a little. And I'm like, yeah, cool, I don't own a plane. I don't know what a plane is in this context. So I just taped it shut.
You taped the drawer shut.
I taped the drawer shut, and honestly, I feel fine about it. Like sometimes the answer is just accept the situation and move on.
That's actually a more interesting sentence than you intended it to be.
Wait, don't do that. Don't make my drawer into a thing.
I'm not making it into anything. It's sitting there.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I went down this rabbit hole at like 2 in the morning last night, and I think, yeah, it kind of connects. I'll get there. So I found this thread on Reddit, and I know how that sounds, but it was called, I'm not making this up, When Did You Realize You Should Have Left Years Earlier? And I could not stop reading for like 3 hours.
What kind of responses?
Just people. Normal people. Writing things like, I knew on our 2nd anniversary, but I stayed for 6 more years. Or, I told myself it would get better every single January for a decade. And it wasn't sad in like a dramatic way. It was almost worse than sad. It was just quiet, you know?
Yeah.
And the thing that kept coming up, like every 3rd comment, wasn't I loved them too much to leave. It was more like, I didn't know who I was without them. Or, I'd told everyone this was the one. And I just kept thinking, that's not love. That's something else.
It is something else. And I think the word for it is a lot less romantic than love.
Okay, what's the word?
Sunk cost. Identity. The story you've already told yourself about your own life.
Okay, so explain that. Because I feel like I've heard sunk cost in like a finance context. Like, don't throw good money after bad. But in a relationship, what does that actually look like?
So the classic framing is, you've already invested so much that leaving feels like losing everything you put in. 2 years, 5 years, whatever. The brain doesn't want to accept that time as gone, as a loss. So instead it just keeps going, looking for the return that would justify the investment.
Right. So it's like, I've already seen 4 seasons of a show I hate. I might as well finish it.
That's exactly it, actually. Except the show is your life.
Okay, that's bleak. But yeah, okay. So where does the identity part come in? Because that felt like a different thing to me.
So there's this concept, I was reading about it actually, maybe a month ago, called self-concept maintenance. The idea being that we don't just have an identity, we actively protect it. We make decisions, we filter information, we tell stories about ourselves, all in service of keeping the self-image intact. And a long relationship becomes completely woven into that self-image. You're not just a person who's dating someone, you become a person who is in that relationship. It becomes part of how you understand yourself.
So leaving isn't just leaving the person. It's like leaving a version of yourself.
And not just leaving, retroactively invalidating it. Because if you leave and say, that was wrong for me, you're also saying the person who stayed for 5 years made a series of bad choices. And that person is you.
Oh, that's rough. That is rough.
The brain finds that very hard to accept.
Okay, wait. This reminds me of something completely unrelated, but hear me out. You know how, conspiracy theorists never change their minds? Like, the more evidence you show them against their theory, the more convinced they get. There's a name for that, right?
Backfire effect.
Backfire effect. And I remember reading that it's not about intelligence. Like, smart people do it just as much. It's about identity. The belief became part of who they are, so attacking the belief feels like attacking the person. And I wonder if that's the same mechanism. Like, defending a bad relationship is defending yourself.
It's the same mechanism. Almost exactly. There's research on cognitive dissonance. Festinger's work goes back to the 50s, showing that when people hold 2 contradictory beliefs, they don't usually resolve the dissonance by changing their mind. They resolve it by adding new beliefs that justify the original one. So in a relationship context, things are bad sits next to, I have invested 6 years of my life and told everyone this is the one, and instead of resolving that by leaving, the brain generates, but we've been through so much together and nobody's perfect, and it's just a rough patch.
So the brain is basically writing its own PR for the relationship.
Constantly, without being asked.
That is so messed up. Okay, but so then what breaks it? Like, what actually makes someone finally leave?
Usually it's not a revelation, it's exhaustion. The cognitive load of maintaining the story becomes greater than the fear of losing the identity. Or something external forces a reframe. A purpose of a recess, a therapist, a moment of clarity that you can't unsee.
Okay, but here's where I push back a little. Because everything you're describing makes it sound like staying is basically irrational. Like the brain is just malfunctioning. But I know people who stayed in hard relationships and it worked out. So isn't there an argument that the brain is sometimes right? That the sunk cost instinct is actually protecting something real?
That's a fair challenge, and I think the honest answer is yes, sometimes. The problem is the mechanism doesn't know the difference. The same cognitive process that keeps someone in a genuinely fixable relationship keeps someone in a destructive one. It's not calibrated to the actual situation, it's just keep the self-image intact, keep the story consistent.
So it's like a smoke alarm that goes off for both actual fires and burnt toast.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
But then how do you know? Like, how does anyone actually know the difference between this is worth working through and I'm just scared to admit I wasted years?
I don't think you can always know cleanly. But there's a question I came across that I found genuinely clarifying, and it's this. Are you staying because of what the relationship is, or because of what you've already put into it? Like, if you woke up tomorrow and clearly seen the people with it, if you append to the general apartment without interested in the relationship self, if you hadn't happened a fresh today with no history, would you choose them?
Oh, yeah, okay, that's a hard question.
Most people already know the answer when they sit with it for 10 seconds.
And then they just don't sit with it.
Right, because sitting with it forces the confrontation with the self, which is the whole thing we've been talking about. The brain doesn't avoid the relationship question, it avoids the self question. There's something worth complicating here, though, because I think there's a version of this conversation that becomes, unconsciously, a bit too cold, like we're making it all sound like a rational calculation problem. And I've been thinking about something that cuts against that, which is, for a lot of people, especially people who grew up in unstable environments, staying in an imperfect relationship isn't a cognitive error. It's the most familiar feeling in the world. Familiar and safe aren't the same thing, but the nervous system doesn't always know the difference.
Oh, that's a different thing entirely.
Someone who grew up watching people leave, or watching relationships be chaotic and unpredictable, might have a baseline that reads, "This is fine," at a level of dysfunction that would feel obviously wrong to someone else. It's not irrational, it's learned. The nervous system is doing exactly what it was trained to do.
So some people aren't even fighting their own judgment. They're fighting the whole framework that taught them what to expect from people.
Which is why just leave is maybe the least useful thing you can say to someone in that situation.
Yeah, it really is. Because it assumes the problem is that they don't know. But most of them do know.
They know. The knowing isn't the barrier.
Okay, here's the thing that I can't stop coming back to. And this might be a weird place to take it, but we talk about this like the relationship is the problem. But what if the real thing people are staying in isn't the relationship? What if it's the story? Like, the version of their life where this works out. And the relationship is just the vehicle for that story.
Say more.
So, like, people don't just stay because they love the person or because they're scared of being alone, right? Some of them are staying because they have this whole vision. Like, we're going to have the house and figure it out, and in 5 years it'll make sense. And leaving doesn't just mean leaving the person, it means leaving that entire projected future. The wedding they imagined. The kids, maybe. The narrative arc of their own life that they've been constructing in their head for years. And that's almost harder to leave than the actual person.
There's actually a term for this. It's called, and I don't love the clinical name, but future self continuity. The degree to which you identify with your future self. And people with high future self continuity make decisions heavily based on protecting that future person's story. So yes, in a sense you're exactly right. They're not staying for who the partner is today. They're staying for who they both might become, for the story that hasn't been written yet.
And the cruel thing is, the longer you stay, the more you've invested in that future story too. So it compounds. Every year you stay is another year of that future being more real in your head.
And harder to give up.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? And this is going to sound strange, but grief. Like actual grief. When someone dies, people talk about grieving the person, but there's this whole other layer, which is grieving the future you thought you'd have with them. All the things that were never going to happen now. And I wonder if leaving a relationship, especially a long one, has the same layer to it. You're not just grieving who they were, you're grieving who you both were going to be.
I think that's right. And I think it's one of the most under-acknowledged parts of breakups. We don't really have good language for it. We say moving on like it's a single action, but you're actually grieving multiple losses simultaneously. The person, the identity, the future, the story. That's a lot.
And we give people like 2 weeks before we expect them to be over it.
If that.
I don't know. I keep coming back to those Reddit comments. All those people who knew and stayed anyway. And I don't think any of them were stupid. I don't think any of them were weak. I think they were just doing what the brain does. Protecting the story, protecting the self.
And maybe that's the most human thing in the world. The brain isn't broken when it does this. It's working exactly as designed. It's just designed for a world where consistency and commitment had survival value. It hasn't quite caught up to a world where you can just choose differently.
Which is maybe why it feels so hard, even when the logical answer is obvious.
The logical answer is almost never the actual barrier. It's never been the actual barrier.
So what's the question then? Like, if it's not about knowing better, what is it actually about?
I think it's about being willing to become someone whose story looks different than the one you planned. Which is, honestly, one of the harder things a person can do.
And some people just never get there.
Some people never get there.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.